Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tropical Trade Group, and this is your end of day market summary for Wednesday, January 22nd. Thank you for joining me for this video. Risk disclaimer. Where is the risk disclaimer? In front of you. There it is. Everything that I'm going through is for information purposes, not giving out anybody's recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only. So, looking at a couple of themes of the day. Well, we had bonds kind of take a little bit of a break. We know that bonds have been strong and, not that much of a down day. TLT was down 0.5%. And a lot of people talking about today that the breadth wasn't particularly good. I think if you look at a couple things here, and again, we're just talking about one day. I think overall we've had such a nice day and things like, excuse me, we've had such a nice movement the last few days in things like the small caps and in micro caps, which I talked about in yesterday's video. So I think I'm going to I'm going to probably say this a lot during this video, but it's okay for this market to come in and back and fill a little bit. Now, we still had a very nice day for the Qs, up 1.3% on the back of Netflix earnings, as well as, the other catalyst was that the Trump administration is talking about, number one, easing up, I would assume easing up the regulations in the AI space. You go back to the previous administration and they were kind of looking to regulate that more and put more like safety assurances in. They were very worried about AI. Now, Trump is, the new administration is instead wants to make sure that America is number one in the AI space. So a different perspective. I'm not going to go into those. You may have your own perspective on whether or not that's the right thing to do. I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. So all we could basically do is basically, understand, our job as traders is to understand what the market dynamics are, what the new policies are, and then we can kind of go from there and try to position the right way for them. I would say this too. I'm going to start off with this because remember the previous administration put a ton of money towards the semiconductor space. Now you could look at the semi space over the last year, because these policies do have somewhat of an effect, but then they begin to it wanes a bit, and I think that's what you're looking at here in the semi space. Now, I don't know the exact time frame of when they announced all those investments into, into the semiconductors, but clearly the first half of 2024 was huge for the semiconductors. Here's where SMH basically started off for the year. Right, this was at 172. This basically topped out in July at 279, and we haven't gone up since. There's been a lot of consolidation of those gains. So that's how you can kind of think about it too with, those types of investments is there's going to be these knee-jerk reactions or movements, but overall, like the companies still need to perform well, right? And I go back to earnings. You have to have strong earnings and also, a decent runway of growth. And that's what's really going to kind of drive things, I think, a little bit. So, don't lose, sight of, that administrations provide this type of stimulus from time to time, but sometimes it's a little bit of a sugar rush, and the companies still have to execute. And it's the same thing too with, look at companies like GM and Ford, right? Those companies to some extent have gotten stimulus and have gotten money over time. And, you can kind of look at these charts and maybe look at the weekly chart and, to some extent, it hasn't had that much of a big effect on their stock price. Maybe their stock price would have fallen more and maybe they would be more of an underperformer, but you kind of have to take these things with, a grain of salt. Now, let's go back to, let's go back to this and let's talk about, I guess, we'll talk about TLT for a minute first, because I think there's a lot of implications here. Number one, I'm on the weekly chart here of TLT. So we've rallied. We rallied last week, but we're still basically in a downtrend here in bonds. So I still remain a little bit suspect until I see us. Here's where I let the technicals back up. Thoughts like, could it be that TLT has a big year? I mean, it could be. It could be that bonds have a big year. But at the very least, they've got to get into this year's value area, and that level is 88.28. So I remain suspect the bonds, and unless I'll get more constructive on bonds if they can get into the value area. So again, you kind of have to be a little bit of patience. Remember where we were in regard to patience, where we were 2 weeks ago was horrible for bonds. Yields were going higher, right? And then of course, like the sentiment shifts very quickly. All it takes is 1 week of gains and people like bonds again. So I would just try to stay like, not get exuberant about these things and realize that bonds are still in a downtrend. They just bounced off of support. So 88.28 is a level that I am watching there in bonds. That's the bottom of this year's value area. And again, why am I starting with bonds? Because they have a lot of implications on what is going to happen and what groups are going to lead. Let's talk a little bit about SPY and where we are. So first of all, weekly chart, and we still have 2 more days of the week, so I tend to not even look at the. I pulled up the weekly chart here by accident. I tend to really not look at the weekly charts until we get to Thursday, right? Because then it's almost looking at like a daily chart, like a daily chart at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The day's not complete, but you kind of have a good idea about how that candle for the day is going to finish. And it's kind of the same thing too as you get towards the end of the week. You kind of know what this is going to look like. So this is nice. This is not bad looking, right? And I just want to, so this video today is going to be a little bit about perspective as I'm going along here, because number one, we've rallied really strong from the lows where sentiment was kind of washed out. People were talking about all these uh, these short-term surveys. What is it? The AAII survey where people got bearish, but all it takes is like 1 week of good price action, and the sentiment shifts back to like greed, basically. I don't use that CNN fear and greed model because I think it's almost just one of the components I think is the VIX in that. So it's not the best model, but you can certainly use that analogy of fear and greed and so forth. So, we were probably at fear here, and we're probably almost back at greed up here. Now we've made this 80, we've crossed the whole value area for the month. So that's complete. You can see that this is no longer green. If you saw in like the last couple of videos, you saw that this was highlighted in green, meaning that the bullish 80% rule had been triggered. So this is done, right? And now we're back, we're testing those highs. Now we could spend some days testing here. But I would, so let's see where to go with this first. Next week is when we're going to have all the big heavy hitters in terms of all the earnings. We're going to have, I think on like 2 days, you're going to get almost all the Magnificent Seven names. I think Google, Amazon, Meta, Apple, those will all be reporting. So I think for this market to kind of take another leg higher, we're going to have to continue to see strong earnings. Now, up till now, we have seen some good earnings. Netflix, for example, right? Now, Netflix, it wasn't the move pre-market wasn't exactly embraced, but it still closed at a high. I mean, this is such a big move. Like you could have, if this thing didn't jump up so much pre-market, people would have been, looking at this candle and said, "Oh my God, that's great," but it got all the way up to basically 1,000, and that's a little bit too hot. So that's why that's come in, and maybe this provides a good entry price if it falls down another by 2.7% down to the top of the value area. But ultimately, very good results. They had their own catalyst too. They had that Tyson fight, and they announced a $10 billion buyback. So I wouldn't let that. I'm not going to draw the conclusion that this results for Netflix is going to mean, Google reports good numbers or Amazon reports good numbers. But it does show that the consumer has money to spend to watch things like a boxing fight, and they're signing up for memberships and so on and so forth. So, I think that you want to take that with a, kind of take some information, extract some information from it. Now, look at UAL. So United had great numbers too, but notice what it did today. It finished down on the day. So my point is that there's, depending on which stock you're looking at, it can be that there's a lot of good news priced in. And United was one that, had rallied huge, right? Was sitting there at all-time highs. But it's just so much more of a difficult situation when you've had this type of a rally. You go back to Netflix for a second, right? Netflix is a little bit, was a little bit depressed into the numbers, right? If this reported here, right, maybe it wouldn't have been such a strong reaction than reporting here when obviously the price has come in a little bit. And it was the kind of the same thing. What was the name that I was looking at? Like BlackRock, for example. Now, BlackRock hasn't been able to really turn the corner, but look at when they reported earnings. The stock was all the way down here, right? JP Morgan too. It took them a couple days, and look at what they've done, right? Since they reported earnings. Like I think here's where they oh, no, here's where they reported earnings. No, so they did get off to a good start. But that's the other thing. We know that the financials have reported. They've reported good numbers. Do I want to go out and buy JP Morgan here? No, I don't. So I think as you're going through charts, you're going to want to ask yourself, is this a good place to buy? Where's your support? How far have we rallied over the last 5 days? And I think that's going to begin to kind of give you some answers about what we should do with this market over here. My opinion is we've had a really nice run. You go back to where when we started the year, every time I turned on the TV or turned on some type of financial media, everybody was talking about that this is going to be a choppy year. So you have to ask yourself, do you still believe that? Is this year going to be a choppy year where you sell rips and buy dips? Or is it going to be, or are we going to see another really strong, plus 20% year? Now, I don't have the answer to that question, but from a short term or medium term trading perspective, I know that we're a little bit extended here at the top of the value area. So it doesn't mean that we can't keep going. Take a look at what we did in August, right? We really, once we started August, after we kind of got beaten up of July, and I guess in the beginning of August, we really fell, but we put together a nice little run there, and we made it to the top of the value area. We kind of hesitated, we came in a little bit, shook everybody out, and then moved higher. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do something like this. Right, maybe we consolidate up here, wait for new information about earnings, and then decide whether or not we want to go up or down. But look at the numbers so far, where we are. So year to date. So this video is mainly about perspective, and it's mainly about patience. And I know I run a trading room, so it's very difficult for me to say, hey, I don't want to add any new trades today. I want to sit on my hands. Meanwhile, I've got a trading room that's open all day long. But hey, this is about making money, and it's about understanding probability and understanding how much harder it is going to make money versus what we've seen over the last week. Now, that doesn't mean you can't find trading opportunities. There's always news, and like we saw some story today about CRISPR, CRSP, which moved. So there's going to continue to be those types of one-off opportunities on things. But ultimately, I think for now, I think a lot of stocks have gotten stretched very quickly because we've made a very quick move. So let me just look at this again. Oops. Let's bring up the right spreadsheet. All right, here we go. Yeah, I mean, this has happened very quickly where we've got, Qs are up 4% year to date. The mid caps are up 5.1, right? I mean, that's a pretty good month to start off with. So let's see what we do from here on. And things are gonna, we only have 2 more days of this week, and then next week earnings are really gonna pick up. So that's kind of my thought. I'll go through a few more charts here because and again, like these are not bad things. These are really good things to say, hey, we made some money. And I manage 2 portfolios. I manage the TTG trend portfolio, which has done very well, made some adjustments in that portfolio. It's as the month has progressed and as earnings have progressed. And then I have my trading account too, which I'm going to be a little bit quicker with names. But here's the Qs, right? Back outside of the value area. The good thing is we've gotten out of the pattern of, for a while, lower highs. Now it could be that we could do some backing and filling. Another thing that I look at is the 5-day moving average. We're a little bit stretched from that 5-day moving average. And that's the same thing for the SPY. But, if you want to go long here, if you think that names are going to continue to, names are going to run into their earnings, then I would watch 527.27. And that's a level that you could be long the Qs versus, because we're now above value, right? We haven't been above value for the whole month. So again, above value means breakout territory. Let's go back to the SPY, because look at the 5-period moving average. right? Again, it's a little bit extended here, right? A little bit, a little bit. And then IWM inside day, so no change in like the short-term trend. However, look at where IWM stopped, right? Right at the 50-day moving average. So, again, that to me, we've had a real nice rally from the 200-day moving average, right? Heck of a nice move from the 200-day moving average. But now, maybe this IWM goes back sideways a bit. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. Standout areas for today, the semiconductors. Let's talk about the semis. I already mentioned a little bit about the semis, but yeah, that's a nice move. We're now moving out of this range. That would be great, right? If this continues. I continue to like this ETF because it's equally weighted and some of the smaller names are getting a little bit more action, but we're actually testing those July highs in this ETF. Right, and a little bit of a rejection there. We can go through a couple of these names. NVIDIA got some love today finally after getting, that big rejection. Notice it came right back up to this version point of control right in there, but finally got, moving right back to where we are. This is still a tough chart, right? But I think that the way to kind of position in a sideways type chart, range bound chart, is to buy the lows and then sell the high of the range, right? That's sideways stuff for you. That's sideways. Some people like that. Some people will feel very comfortable about buying the low of the range, right? And then taking off some at the highs, right? So that's something to be mindful of. So that's NVIDIA. Marvell, right, which has also been a strong name, did not like have as big of a move as like in ARM Holdings. ARM Holdings, congrats if you're long this name. I did not get long this name. I looked at it yesterday. I didn't pull the trigger, but I mean, look at the difference, right? This is up 16% today, right? And again, just kind of coming into some resistance. But hey, if you were long this, you're very happy based on the price action today. Broadcom, which I got long yesterday, and that's also why I didn't trade ARM. And I did take a profit target right at the open today, similar to what I talked about in CRDO yesterday. I took a target, the same same thing in CRDO. Now I got lucky here because CRDO went higher, and this looks pretty good, right? What about this name, ALAB? Um, I'm watching this name now. It's digesting, after this big run. Let's see what it does here at the 50-day moving average, right? So that's one name to keep tabs on. Software names also did really well today. Where did AppLovin finish for today? Another name like up 7%. This did close above the value area, and maybe this wants to now continue. Right, it's now spent, since it made this high back in the beginning of December. It spent about a month, maybe a little bit more than a month at this point, consolidating. So again, you want to see consolidation in an uptrend. Very, very nice. GEV reported earnings. This was very interesting because the name did not report good numbers, but it goes to show you right now that this market is really in tune with themes that are at play, right? And this was a very nice move off the lows. You could have bought this off the lows. I did this yesterday, by the way. I bought GEV off the lows yesterday. Didn't do it today. I was holding a little piece, and I sold the rest of it today in my trading account. Still have it in the TTG trend portfolio. But if you look at these names, just like I was saying with a couple other stocks, like VST, right? Do you want to buy VST up here? Right? Do you want to buy CEG up here? You know, no, for me, I'll answer that question for you. No, it's extended. Let these things kind of come in a little bit, in my opinion. Now, if you're still holding a piece of this stuff, you're riding your gains, that's fine, right? And I put on CEG and the TTD trend portfolio last week, so that's working out quite nicely for me. And, I'll continue to stay long with that because it's a different philosophy than, being in my trading account. And another name, there's a bunch of these different names. TLN worked out pretty well for me. That's a name that I put on last week. But this also really quickly has gotten extended. So that's what I think. I think of your big quality names right now. Some of these names are pretty extended. Let's talk about the FANG names, because as I mentioned in the pre-market prep show that we do every morning, starting at 8 in the morning, I talked about how you might see now that Netflix has reported and people are like, oh, one of these big tech communications type media companies has really good earnings. Now let's look at some of the other names, because a couple of these names have been dormant for a little bit. Amazon breaking out to new highs today. Google, which had some issues yesterday, did not close on the highs, but if it wants to, as long as it's above 197.50, let's go and let's look at Microsoft. Had a huge day today. Biggest day in a long time, up 4%. You haven't seen Microsoft move like this in a long time. Bullish 80% rule there. And that's going to also report, I believe, next week. So again, will these names have a chance to possibly continue to run into earnings? Remember, if you've been trading for a while, you know that these names sometimes like to run into the earnings report, right? And sometimes that's the better trade than trying to figure out what they're going to do on earnings. It's just to kind of understand that they might run into earnings. Amazon is the name that I'm kind of watching for that. Look at Meta, so same thing with, same type of candle with Google. It's not a lot of buy-in on the stock going higher right now. So perhaps they're still waiting for some more information. Apple, I think, is going to be very interesting because it's down to the 200-day moving average, right? The expectations, all these brokers are downgrading it. So it's going back to what we were saying about some of the other names, it's an easier bar for this to jump over. So, would I want to be going long Apple here? No, for earnings. Here, possibly, right? So I think that that's going to be fairly interesting. So, so the reason why, again, we're kind of trying to look forward a little bit and say all these names are going to report. Which names do you think could possibly run into their report? I think it could be Amazon, maybe Google, and and obviously Microsoft had a big day today. So I'm going to keep the video somewhat short, and ultimately, if you've had really good gains with this market, now your job is try not to give it back, right? And try to understand a little bit about market dynamics. Again, all about probabilities, because no one knows. And I hate to tell you, even the really good salespeople on Twitter who make it sound like they know what is going to happen the following day, they don't know either. They're just selling you on something. It's all about probability. So the question is, could we continue to rally from here? Sure, we could. But watch the top of the value area and understand that we've had a nice move over the last week. I think you're going to need more earnings reports to kind of back up a potential next leg higher. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.